All right, welcome back to the Big Picture with Ian Nash. I'm your host, Ian Nash. We're back with Grant. Grant, how is it going?
It's going great, and I'm looking forward to today's show. Ghosts, goblins, scary creatures, whatever we're doing.
Exactly. So yeah, that's the question. What are ghosts? What are we seeing when we see ghosts or we see apparitions or things move, poltergeist, that type of thing? And what are your personal experiences with ghosts?
Yeah, when we talk about ghosts in general, there's so many different categories today. Ghost experts say, from poltergeists to like demonic beings, and everything in between. Uh, but I think the bigger picture would just be sitting back. We talk about paranormal activity. I think a ghost in most people's minds or a haunting is simply they explain it as there's some activity or something going on in this world that isn't from this world. That it's seen as being from the spirit world or from the afterlife that is presenting itself in this world in one way or another. So that's the basic general idea of what a ghost is.
So I guess as a kid, I remember being taught that ghosts, or what we experience as ghosts, is could be spirits that kind of get trapped here, that are not quite ready to go to the spiritual world, go to heaven or hell or wherever. And would that be your view as well, or would your view be something else?
It's really interesting because that is a traditional view. As people have studied this more, there's been some theories that actually maybe the ghost it isn't necessarily a spirit that is here that's trapped, but some kind of almost imprint of that spirit or some kind of energy that is from that spirit or from that person that's still stuck in this world. So it's almost like a negative from taking a photograph. It's something, it's not really there, it's not the photograph, but it is an image of it, and that can be an action image, not simply something we see that's still on a wall or in a dark room, but actually something that's an energy produced by the spirit world, but not necessarily a spirit trapped here. I tend to really believe that. Now, I've had different experiences with different kinds of uh, apparitions or ghosts over time. And some of them have been very different. Some of them have most of the time benign, really nothing that would you see on the movies or anything. But I've also had experiences where I've been brought in to do actually house exorcisms and had one that I believed the thing was going to kill me. And I didn't even believe they could do that. So it varies, but I think mostly what people see in this world is some kind of projection of some kind of energy going on here. That's my theory, the one that fits best for me.
Right. So not so much that it's Aunt Selma's spirit coming to see you. It's kind of like a memory of her, or somewhat of an imprint from her spirit, but not that she is actually there or trying to contact you. It's kind of just this built up kind of spiritual energy and memory.
I think that's right, and I think even if you had your aunt, what was it, Selma? If she was smiling or even talking to you, I would still say that that's what that is. I mean, we're talking high tech, so to speak. Like this. But one way to look at it is, I mean, and I think a lot of people could, if anybody's been on a battlefield. I mean, we're not that far from Gettysburg, and where you and I grew up, and I've spent a lot of time there, but there's books on the ghosts of Gettysburg. But if you go there and Pickett's Charge, right there where that happened, and thousands of men died all at once, everybody tell you, you can feel it. You can feel the presence of these soldiers, and this it's more than even just sad. There's just a powerful, powerful sphere. And people have heard people crying out there, like wounded, and all kinds of different things, again and again and again. Are they there? I don't think so. That's because of this tremendous thing that happened there, this emotional energy burst or whatever you want to call it, that some residual, some amazing residual is there now. Maybe even some kind of funnel from the afterlife that's coming in that gives it energy. But it was the historical action itself or thing that happened itself that is allowing that to be there and taking place even now. That's a lot of people's theories. I would go along with that one.
Yeah, just kind of that these places where these really intense things happen, these really traumatic things happen, that energy isn't just dissipated, like it stays there.
Mhm.
Right? And so when we go to these places and yeah, I mean, like my personal experience with ghosts is pretty limited, but I definitely have been places where like you just have that sense of like I should not go there. Like I shouldn't go into
Yeah.
that house. I shouldn't go into that shed. I shouldn't go walk past that abandoned factory, like things like that. You have that sense of just like the energy of a place is just not good. So yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely, and I picked that up a lot, after years of working with this stuff. Pretty quickly, like you're talking about, pretty quickly walking into a place and going, "Ooh, there's something going on here." It's not always, I mean, not always nefarious. I think sometimes we can get in we might watch a scary movie and go into a dark room and think we feel all kinds of stuff. uh, but as you're just talking about, yeah, and also there's sometimes this sense that we get that there's something here. Now, most of the time, I find it's something benign. Something is there, but it's not going to hurt you necessarily. But it's going to scare you because it's not something you're used to.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit ago you actually were involved in an exorcism.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
My next book is going to be on this story, so I could say a lot. I'm not going to. So, I just as I was saying, I grew up with some experiences with a haunting in my house, and from there, people writing the art of spiritual warfare, all that stuff. People thought, call Grant Schnarr if there's a problem, you know. And so I saw a lot of things and heard a lot of stories and stuff like that. But all my life, I mean, even in doing all of this stuff, and even the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg, who I'm a big fan of, don't talk about necessarily something in this world that can hurt you. Spiritually, maybe. Even Jesus said, "Don't worry about those who can hurt the body, but worry about those who can hurt the spirit." And so I walked into this house. Some people called me up and said, "You got to come over here. All kinds of terrible things are happening." And I'll just say that there was this spirit, this man that was tormenting this teenager. And I mean, saying, standing over them, waking them up and telling them he was going to kill them, things like that. It was very bad. And so I went over there, and one of the things you can do. I mean, we talked about it before. Native American smudging ceremony using sage, burning sage, is something that the Native Americans did to chase away evil spirits. Homesteaders picked it up, and it's been picked up by all people for centuries about cleansing a space. And so I said I can go over and do that and say some prayers and stuff like that. And she was like, "I already did that." Very upset. I could go on and on. It's a great story, but I got over there and there was this thick mist in the whole house and these huge flies that later they told me had come up from the basement and were the weirdest things they had ever dealt with. I looked at the whole place. I walked around. I went into the boys' room and walked into the closet. There was a walk-in closet and was seized by this pressure, almost like all of a sudden I found myself 20,000 leagues under the sea, just crushed. My heart was crushed. And it was killing it. I stepped out and I went, "It's in here." And they were like, "Yes." I mean, this is where the man would walk out of. We found out that was actually that whole room back in the day. This was one of the oldest houses in the whole area. It was a kitchen at one time. And so the whole, so it made more sense that the man was, in the old place with the kitchen or whatever like that. All kinds of things. I don't even know what to say. I had a friend of mine, a psychic who we had done work together, come over. Mace Adams, the retired chief of police of Bernathen, joined us in this. We had our own little Ghostbusters team. Um, and went in and fought with this thing, did battle with it, and it was scary. And we finally were able to get rid of most of it. But it was kind of funny. It was almost like almost like being um, an exterminator. You'd go in and we'd work on it, try to get rid of this energy, and it actually, it's like 80% of it left, left, and then there was still 20% there. Worked on it more and more, sweating, dying, got it down to like 2 or 3%, and that was it. It was like, I can't help you anymore. We can't get rid of it. But at the very end, I found what was called in the book I was reading, a nuclear weapon. And that was, and I think that was because you take a holy ceremony and, you bring up the ghost in the ceremony or this demonic thing, whatever it was, and just, say, this is for you as well as everybody else here. We had like 16 teenagers there. It was sort of a wayward home for teenagers. This mother had brought them in, all believers, all had been affected. And I did this Holy Supper service. And everybody seemed to feel like I felt nothing, but they all had a story to tell about what they were feeling. And I will tell you, I wouldn't have written a book about it. I skipped all kinds of stuff until the next morning. What happened was, and this was before any of these, this was way back in the 90s. The boy woke up the next day. The man was standing over him. The man picked him up, went, and threw him against the wall, went like that, like, see ya, and walked out the window. I mean, through the window into the woods. Never more to be seen again. And that's true. To this day, never came back. I tell that story. I tell that story at the college. I tell the whole 45-minute story. And when I first did that, I was actually called in by the boss at one time and said, "Are you telling this story about the?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Please don't. It's scaring the students in the dorm so much they can't sleep." So what did I do? He's gone. So what I do now is I say, they all know it. They want to tell us a story. I'm like, okay, anybody doesn't want to hear it or can't hear that kind of thing, please do leave. And we always have so many leave and tell it. But that's my next book. It's a lot more there. And I know I just took a lot of time. I hope that was fun for people. But I all of a sudden realized, no, oh no, there really are demonic entities. I really believe there was some kind of portal open there, and something stepped through, and we had to deal with it.
Right. So, my next question would be, so you kind of did experience like this possession and this man spirit kind of torturing this boy.
Yeah.
So how does that, because I remember like as a kid being taught like, don't play with Ouija boards because you're weakening the veil between our world and their world, and it's very unlikely that a friendly, positive spirit is going to come through. It's probably going to be some spirit that's trying to affect you in a certain way. So should the average person be worried about getting possessed by a demon, or how does that even start or take place in the first place?
Well, that's so interesting. I mean, there's a lot I could say there, but let me first say that when we did a whole study of this house I was just talking about, and there were these 3 little old ladies who actually grew up their parents owned this house and one right behind it. They rented out this house I'm talking about. And they were trying to look back. They told me all kinds of histories about that house. Like it used to be a school, this and that. I mean, and one of them said, sisters, you're looking the wrong way. Don't you remember when we rented it to some college students and they were doing seances over there and something happened and they fled the house? And so I went, oh, so maybe that is where something broke through. They went in and they had painted the entire house this yellow inside, and there was a broken piano in the middle of the room, which the people that I went to talk to heard occasionally. But it may have come about because of that. All right. So No, you're not going to just get possessed. I think a lot of people, it's the sort of thing with the near-death experience. A lot of people are afraid to talk about death because they think if they talk about it, somehow they'll bring it closer to themselves. Well, it's the same with this. Watching a scary movie or talking about these things, you might feel like something's going to appear to you at any moment, but you're no more likely than before you watch the movie that something's going to do that. As you know, Emanuel Swedenborg, 1688, 1772, scientist, theologian, says it is dangerous, and don't try to contact spirits because it's not easy. You can try, and nothing's going to happen. And I think in an earlier episode we talked about some people are geared a little differently. Maybe they are, the veil's thin for them, but I mean your typical whatever. You don't know what you're doing, and you don't know. And so if you keep trying, eventually you just might break through. And that's the kind of thing I teach my students. I mean, like, it's not worth it. Usually when I teach them that day, they go and find a Ouija board and play around with it. It's like, come on, folks. But yeah, and I've had a few I know some people who went that way and have had things happen to them. Heard voices, or one. I was doing I was doing a book tour with Art of Spiritual Warfare. I was in LA, and we started talking about this a little bit. And there was somebody that was working there that wanted to talk to me. Actually, they said, "Can you talk to this person after the show?" And she had this thing that was happening to her that she had been involved in seances and all this, and they contacted a little girl, and a nice, sweet little scared little girl, and I forget, she had a name and all that. Well, that was all fun and cool, and did it really happen? Who knows? Well, she went home, and this girl started showing up at her house, like like behind the couch, looking out, at her, or different places, and was at first, like, maybe there was a heart thing there, like, what is this? Oh, she followed me. And then basically it went to just terror. I mean, I don't want this to happen anymore. And she didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I mean, there's a couple of things, I didn't go over there. I simply, a lot of times it's, don't give it life. Don't talk to it, ignore it, because oftentimes we're feeding these things, and we're making them more real than what they even are. It's different kinds of prayers that could be said, sage the room, that kind of thing. And truthfully, I don't know what happened. I mean, I never talked to her again. I never heard from her again. I mean, I talked to a lot of people about these kind of things, but that was one that, obviously, right, is notable, that happened. I go on and on. There's other stories as well, but I kind of believe it that, if you're not some kind of special whatever, I don't mess with that stuff. It's not worth it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've never felt like I was at risk of being possessed by anything, and I've never been a Ouija board person. I've never done a seance. I don't even watch scary movies. Like, a lot of people can just really enjoy horror movies and all that stuff. For me, like, it sticks with me. Like, that imagery sticks with me. So I just don't engage with any of that. But I guess my question would be, like, so how much influence do evil spirits have on this world? And do we equate evil spirit with demon, or is demon a real category, or is that just like a phrase that people use?
Well, again, that depends who you talk to, right? There's all different kinds of ideas, and even like religious background, they have all the, what are these demons or evil spirits and things like that, and demonologies and that kind of thing. So I can just give you my opinion on that. Uh, First of all, I mean, in the way that Swedenborg explains evil spirits, that they were once people in this world who died and went to hell, or are on their way to hell, and they're influencing us. But what he says is that we're being influenced by the spiritual world all the time. We are spirits. We're not conscious of that because we're in our natural bodies right now, but we're really connected, as Jung called it, the collective unconscious, I guess it was. And I believe that he got that from Swedenborg. He was a big reader, but the idea that we're all connected, and that's why ideas can pop up across the world at the same time, cures for different things, or, inventions, or other things. There's a lot of times where they find people, some kind of connection happens, also in times where like big world events are going on. So what Swedenborg says is that we're already connected with good and evil spirits. And the joke is on the cartoons, like, say The Simpsons, where the devil's on one shoulder and the angel on the other. Come on, do it. No, don't. And back and forth. But there's something to the idea that these thoughts come into us. And Swedenborg says the devils or evil spirits or whatever don't know necessarily that they're with us, that we're connected. It's kind of like they pick up our thoughts, we pick up theirs, and there's just an association. So, yeah, we're affected. I mean, that every time we allow those thoughts to come into us, in a sense, we're bringing something of those spirits into us, but they're not conscious of it. One of the problems is though, if you make them conscious of it, that's more of a danger, that they can come in. In Jesus's time, there was a lot, or leading up to Jesus's time, there was a lot of demon possession, and it seemed as if at that time these demons, and it's all through the New Testament and the Old Testament, could actually literally take over a body, just simply wipe out or suppress the personality on the inside and take that body away to do whatever it pleased, usually hurt the body and things like that. Jesus basically, and a lot of different Christian philosophies believe this, and Swedenborg talked about this, but what Jesus did in the sense of coming in, and he was able to cast those demons out and conquer at least the ultimate power that hell was having over the human race. I think every Christian believes that happened in some way or another. Jesus came in and did that. That kind of demonic possession doesn't happen anymore, or is super rare, only if like invited. Whereas it just seemed to happen instantaneously. You'd be walking down the street, it could happen before. That's gone. It's your choice. You can bring these things in more and more, but that's a choice of yours. Now, certain people wouldn't agree with that at all. That they would say, no, it happens all the time. But he does say there's also something like more like obsession that happens today. He goes, the more and Jesus said it, if whoever commits sin becomes the slave of sin, and in those terms. But the more you allow like this influence, we're just saying, of evil to flow through you and embrace it and all that, the more it takes you over, And so in a sense, you're being possessed by this force of evil from the other world. And it becomes less and less your choice, in the sense of you're just getting taken over by it. So that's right there. I was involved in one exorcism, and it was a priest therapist who, who invited me to come in I knew the woman who was getting the exorcism, and we did it in a Native American sweat lodge. I mean, talk about this really crazy thing. And I was just an assistant, so to speak. And this person, though, their head wasn't spinning around on their bodies and stuff like that, but they went through a lot of emotional stuff. And she really wanted that done. She had a lot of, she was schizophrenic, and she felt that she was demon possessed. And the therapist priest that I did this with, he said, whether she is or not, I think this is really going to help her. I mean, in the sense of having her go through this. When it was over, she went through a whole lot of stuff. When it was over, she seemed to come through a time of peace, relief, exhaustion. We were all exhausted. There were more than the two of us in there at the time. And she felt like it really helped her. Did she get fully better? No. Today, actually, she's doing quite well. But, was it really a demon or schizophrenia, or some combination of that, which I think is interesting to look at as well, just spirits and schizophrenia. That was something else. And I think that was probably, I don't know, some combination, of some kind of at least breaking through in some way. Maybe the mirror was shattered in a way, if you want to think about it in those terms.
Yeah. I think, when you think about all these different paranormal things, or, UFOs, these types of things, where so many people are so quick to just say, "Oh, it's a hoax,
I
it's fake,"
know.
all that. But when it comes to possessions and like, why would a person ever fake this? Like when I look at like what I might consider definite proof of things beyond the physical and things like that, it's like why would a person ever do this to themselves? And
Yeah.
just complete. I guess yeah, there are people who torture themselves or whatever, but it just to me like I don't know why would someone pretend to be possessed, to get famous or something. It just doesn't make sense to me at all.
Well, then you hear those stories. Now, I've never been to one of these, but where the possessed person starts speaking in different languages, right? I mean, a child. I mean, or having something written onto their skin somehow or another. Um, that people say that has been documented. Again, maybe I've never experienced that personally or seen it, but some of that stuff you really go, something's going on there. Um, but if we were connected, naturally connected to each other and to this spirit world, and where all our thoughts are continually, moving back and forth, and we kind of we're the radio receiver. We tune in. Well, what do we want to receive and bring through ourselves? Um, that would only make sense. That sometimes it may not work exactly the way it's supposed to. Maybe we mess it up a little bit. So these aura these whatever they are, auras or energies or whatever, do come into us in a way that is harmful. Is it a mix of something in us that, like I said, shattered, like a sense of like our different personalities, something that happens in our own psyche or somewhere else, or a combination? And I think probably, again, I said before, I think sometimes it's a combination. Wilson Van Dusen wrote this book called Spirits and Madness. I think you've probably heard of it. And he was a psychologist that started thinking, maybe are these people actually who hearing voices? Are they actually hearing voices? Are they hearing something from the spiritual world? Or is it completely, absolutely something that's just inside of somebody's brain? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, the brain's always connected to what's going on in a spiritual world. But his studies, he really came to believe that actually, no, these people were picking up on it. Other spirits were coming through, and they were hearing things that actually uh, that were real. And I know you'd have to read the book Spirits and Madness. It's just a little book, but Wilson Van Dusen. But it was fascinating. I think there's a lot of work that's been done in that area since.
Yeah. And just as I know, like, um, you've mentioned to me like your experiences from your childhood, and just kind of like from a very early age being exposed to just this
Mhm.
potential of like it not being theoretical to you. Like it's in your life, it's never been theoretical. It's like this is a real phenomenon, whether it is actually spirits or actually something else. Like to have these experiences and like you have mentioned to me before, like just seeing a record come off the record
Yeah.
player and fly across the room and break. I mean,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like other people who have never had these experiences can say, "Oh, you're lying," or "Oh, you dreamt it," or
Well, yeah,
"Oh, some hallucination." But at some point, you just have to
yeah.
take people at their word. Like, and this is kind of where I
Mhm.
come down on all this stuff: ghosts,
Mhm.
UFOs, visitations, all that stuff. Is like I personally am not comfortable calling every person who's had an NDE, every person who's experienced like a visitation or seen something in the sky or seen a ghost or whatever. I just can't say that all those people are liars. I'm not
Mhm.
comfortable doing that. So yeah, I think it's very important like for people who have personally had these experiences, like for you writing books about these types of things
Mhm.
is really important because we can't just treat all these things as hallucinations.
It's really interesting because when and I agree completely. When we did that house exorcism, I told you that the chief of police, where they had just retired, was part of it. I at that time was assistant pastor in at the Brynathan Church, which is a big church, as you know, and um, he started. telling everybody about this stuff, like what happened and what we saw. We actually saw it, and people were going like, "Oh, come on," and stuff. And I'm thinking, I had to go say, Mace, don't tell anybody that story. They're not. I mean, because I work here. I mean, there's so many people that would not take it credibly. They weren't there. We know it happened, and you just got to stop telling people about it. And so he did. But things are. There's always going to be those people who don't believe. I didn't get a chance to actually tell that story on this podcast. So just really quickly, where I first became aware of these types of things is that we did have a room in our house where we grew up called the New Room. And it's in my book, Ghost Brother Angel, if you want to read about it. And it was simply a presence, a very strong presence in the room. All my four sisters all felt it, believed in it. My parents always said, "Oh, there's nothing in there." But later they confessed that some things happened they didn't want to tell us about. It was mainly just a presence. If you were sad, it would be sad with you, or you happy, it seemed to be happy with you. Most of the time, it never was anything scary. I mean, no, it was scary in the sense that you thought maybe it was going to appear to you, but it never did anything harmful. But what it did do, there were some friends of mine, they're still alive today. They'll tell you, yes, this happened. We knew that there was a ghost in there, and we did, as kids, a seance. Okay, so, and there was the record player that it had a short in it that would go like that. And it seemed to be kind of communicating with us through this short in the record player. Like it would start, we go, "Hey, shut up," and it would go, "Shoot," and it would just stop. So, but it liked certain songs. And so back in the day, it loved Tuesday Afternoon by the Moody Blues. Great song, and when we played that song, it would well up. The feeling in the room would well up very strongly. But when we played this other song called Wild Thing by the Trogs, Wild Thing, You Make My Heart Sing, which Jimi Hendrix did as well, did a great job of that song, by the way. But when we played that song, it was agitated. It didn't like that song at all. And we were sitting there one day, right there with the record player was 2 feet from my face, when we were sitting there on the wall, and it was playing. We had on a little 45, it was playing Wild Thing by the Trogs, and right above it, ready to come down, was Tuesday Afternoon. And as we're listening to Wild Thing, yes, we felt the agitation. The needle scraped across the record, off the record. Tuesday Afternoon lifted up. Wild Thing came off, flew across the room, and broke on the fireplace. Tuesday Afternoon came down, started playing. And what do you think we did? We went, "Oh!" and we ran out of the room. I think I was probably 13. And I was, talking to my mom. I was scared. What happened? How did that happen? We were all like that. And, my mom calmed me down. So, in some way or another, tried to say either it didn't happen or some weird, whatever. But I remember very, very distinctly saying to myself again and again, it happened. I don't know how it happened. There's no rules that anyone's told me about explaining how it doesn't fit in the rules, but it did happen. And, there were tons of people my age who believed in that particular thing, felt that thing. A friend of mine, Grant Smith, who we would do homework in there every night and this and that. We could pick it out of where it was in the room. A friend of ours, now a good friend of mine, Tom Rose, was in college. He did his senior project in college on this ghost. And we were able to pick out where Grant and I pick out where it was, write it down, and and then compare notes. Like 14 out of 18 times, we knew exactly where this thing was. Later on, which is so funny, it was turned into an apartment. And actually, Jake and Maggie Gyllenhaal's grandmother lived there for years, and she never felt anything. And it just seemed like it went away. Again, sometimes when you mess with something, you wake something up when you mess with a room, and I guess sometimes when you mess with the room, it goes away. I don't know what it was. I have no clue, but I know that it was. And you could call me crazy and them crazy. But maybe I am, but that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of ways we kind of force people into silence on all these
Yeah.
different topics. It's like in your situation, like you had to tell mates, you're like, hey man, please stop telling people this story because people are gonna say you're crazy, people are gonna say I'm crazy, I work for the church, blah blah blah. It's like, when people's like professional livelihood is at stake, like, like obviously, I mean,
Yeah.
in your situation, you didn't, I don't think you were about to get fired because of it, but for other people it is like, and
Mhm.
especially when you have police officers and pilots and
Yeah.
all these people where they're like, do not talk about this, and people who do, and they do get fired and their careers are destroyed. It's really unfortunate that um, we don't have more open-mindedness around all these different topics, of just, instead of calling everybody a liar or saying, well, you're not lying, but you misinterpreted what was happening and blah blah blah. It's just, it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that's become the norm
Yeah.
on so many different topics, that
Yeah.
we're not allowing discourse on all these different topics because we're saying, oh, that's, out of hand. We're saying that's
Mm.
impossible,
Well,
right? So
it's interesting. Even with that, it's your interpretation or oh, you made that up. Well, when that thing happened with the record player and all that, I actually had learned somewhere about, maybe it was more like growing up a little bit, 15, 16, or whenever I came upon it, but that there's studies showing that oftentimes with poltergeists, there can be a disturbed teenager in the home, and there's a lot of energy coming off of them. And as a teenager, I thought, well, maybe I'm doing this. Maybe I caused that to happen. Just to show you, I wasn't, oh, go, ghost, ghost. I mean, it was like, I don't know how it happened. Maybe it really was some other explanation that someday we're going to find out. Teenagers can, have all this angst and they can throw this energy out in such a way that causes things to fly around and break. But just to show you, I mean, I didn't necessarily want to believe that, I call it a ghost because I couldn't explain it any other way.
yeah, well, it's true. Everything is teenagers' fault. So
That's it. That's it.
they never. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
Like evil spirits, possessions. It's
Oh yeah.
just, it's angsty teenagers
Um,
just making everything
mhm.
suck for everybody. So
That's
yeah.
great.
Oh man. All right. I love it. Good stuff. And yeah, we can probably explore this further. And yeah. And
There's so
yeah.
much there. I love obviously I love talking about this subject. So
Cool.
anytime.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.